Weekday on 4CA. John MacKenzie. 1300 872911.
Now, this issue bobbed up yesterday, I think it was yesterday in the Courier Mail. And once again, this is the sort of legislation that is considered and drawn up in Brisbane, 2,000 kilometres away, without any consideration of the far-reaching impacts on us up here in Townsville and Cairns. Here we go. This is the heading yesterday in the Courier Mail. This is virtue signalling at its worst. Drunk law under review. And it says here, being drunk in public. Remember what we're enduring at the moment in our CBD. You walk down Shield Street, you walk along Lake Street in the morning, the stench of the urine, the stench of the faeces, and you've got people drunk there by 9 o'clock in the morning and confronting people with their foul language and ghastly confrontations. And they talk, and the begging here is not like begging in Brisbane. Here you're approached sometimes with a wine glass, sometimes with a jagged edge, saying, give us money or else. This is the sort of thing that, of course, people in Brisbane who put these ideas together have no idea about. They just love to virtue signal at every opportunity. Now, it reads here, being drunk in public and begging could be decriminalised, while the offence of, wait for it, urinating in public could also be repealed under a state government review of the offences. Did you hear people getting off the boats the other day that saying, how can you put up with the stench of urine through your streets in the CBD? It goes on to say the Community Support and Services Committee is taking submissions on the offences while all considering diversion services, health and welfare implications, and the appropriateness of police powers to ensure community safety. Solicitor Bill Potts said the measures, if implemented, would be a step in the right direction, but was concerned it did not address the root causes of these problems. It can go on with all this, well, fundamentally Brisbane-centric lunacy. But anyway, Mr Potts said targets of the offences were disproportionately Indigenous people who were often homeless, with the offences usually used to remove from sight when they were people who needed help. It goes on in this article to read, former police detective and Bond University criminologist Terry Goldsworthy said alcohol-related offences still needed punishment, and police already used discretion with the begging. Now, he questioned what level of decriminalisation would apply, whether any categories would remain in legislation and be enforceable. Once again, this is the sort of stuff that often goes unnoticed in Brisbane about the impact it's going to have here. And not only that, our representatives don't stand up in Parliament and say, wake up to yourselves. Don't you realise what we have to endure day in, day out, night in, night out in far north Queensland, particularly Townsville and Cairns? Anyway, Terry Goldsworthy, Dr Terry Goldsworthy, Associate Professor in Criminology at Bond University, is on the line. G'day, Terry.
Yeah, good morning. How are you?
Here's another example of these people in Brisbane who make decisions on behalf of the whole state, including regional areas, who haven't got a clue of conditions on the ground, in this case up here.
Yeah, look, I'll just apologise for the background noise. They're doing a fire alarm test, as is always the way when you're about to do a live interview. But yeah, I mean, you really have to query what is the logic in terms of why we need to repeal these laws. I mean, if you're going to change something, then usually you need to put forward the case why there needs to be change. I haven't seen any evidence of that come out. Now, I understand the police are going to be giving some evidence to the committee today, so it'll be interesting to see what the police have to say about these offences. But, I'm just perplexed as to someone who's walked the beat of Surface Paradise and dealt with many drunks. There are some people who are that inebriated that they need to be removed for their own safety, and there's other people who are that inebriated that they're simply obnoxious and they're obviously going to go on and cause some issues later in the day. So these aren't people who usually you can negotiate with at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of Surface Paradise. They're people who you need to have some power to take them into custody for their own protection, for the protection of others. I mean, we know that alcohol plays a major role in assaults. I mean, in a study by the ABS last year, 60% of assaults were believed to involve alcohol. So it just befuddles me why we think we need to remove these powers from the police.
Interesting, you bring that one up. Here's the serious assault figures. Cairns compared with Brisbane. Serious assault more than 3 times the rate of Brisbane. So there's an example of why these regulations, if there's going to be modifications, this could be really, really negative for us. Let me give you an example of what we put up with up here. Now, we've got an explosion of kiddie crime. We've got kids in town. Some of these kids are carrying knives. They're stealing handbags off restaurant tables, etc., and running through the city. And now you pick up the newspaper, the Cairns Post, the other day. A crime briefing for Cairns businesses has been told human rights laws restrict police officers' ability to tackle nuisance behaviour in the CBD. The police officer said police could not chase young offenders who might have been chroming because they could potentially suffer heart failure from running. Who comes up with this stuff? And we've got now police up here hobbled. If indeed drunkenness is not going to be an issue in town, if indeed urinating is not going to be an issue in town, once again, they're sending us to the dogs.
Well, if you look at the inquiry, it seems to be instigated on the back of a letter from the Queensland Law Society, and they refer back to the Deaths in Custody Commission that took place over 30 years ago. If you have a look at the figures in the latest Deaths in Custody report that we can see for 2020-21, there was one Indigenous death in custody, in police custody in Queensland. Now, just to put that in perspective, there were 78,000 Indigenous offenders actioned by the QPS in the same period. So while I don't say any death in custody is something to ignore, I'm just showing the scope of the problem there isn't as great as some people may have us believe. And generally those type of things, often the issue is not so much the arrest or the police taking action. It's a failure of protocols and processes in the care of that person in the watch house, etc. So you don't necessarily fix the issues in the watch house by just simply removing arrest powers and don't arrest anyone because then no one will go to the watch house. I mean, that's just a illogical approach to the problem.
The fact that it's getting this sort of publicity at that stage, of course, doesn't mean it's definitely going to become a reality. But I mean, the warning bells are ringing once again up here because this is the sort of thing so often goes unchallenged by our representatives. Do you think this will get over the line or not?
Well, I think there's a strong push for it to get over the line, particularly the drunkenness offence. People, with vested interests want that removed. I think that's going to be very problematic for the police. And if you remove it as a police issue, then you need to put someone into that space to deal with the drunks because they're not going to go away. So there'll have to be a health response. Now, we know the ambulance staff, rightly so, don't want to go and deal with anyone who's intoxicated and aggressive without police being there. But the police will simply respond, well, it's not a criminal offence, so why should we spend our time there? In terms of, public urination, I'm just absolutely aghast that we would think that it's okay to urinate in public. I mean, so what is the gist here? Are we going to they want to repeal the law against urinating in public, so it's not an offence. Will the police then have to rely on the offence of public nuisance to capture those people? So you've got a specific offence for urinating, and then get rid of that, and then we've got to use a general offence. And the thing is, for public urination and drunk, the fine is about $350. Maximum fine is $350. If you remove those offences and police then have to rely on public nuisance, the fine then goes up to $1,500. So we're actually putting a much bigger punitive impost on people if we remove these offences.
All of those fines up here, from my experience, go on the Spur account anyway, Terry.
Yeah, I suspect many do.
Try 99%. Terry, always good to talk to you. Thanks for the update.
No worries.
Associate Professor in Criminology at Bond University, Dr Terry Goldsworthy.